whoa, 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 whoa. Get out the way, get out the way, get out the way, yeah. Yeah. Get out the way, get the fuck up out my way, yeah. Yeah. Win, 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 win.
Yo, this is MST, episode 22. We're back talking to the NFL. It's now moving on to week 7, but first we have to recap week 6 and week 5. All right, so later on, we're also going to get into the power rankings, but first, let's go through some of these week's games. And if there's any other items from last week that will pop up, I'll bring it up about the team as I go along. Green Bay Packers and San Francisco 49ers, the last game that we had on our schedule. It was a good game overall, but it was a very disappointingly executed game. It was close, which made it good, but the 49ers just shat the bed. I mean, the 49ers, I've seen a lot of fans, and they actually had high expectations for themselves. With Jimmy G, they may have been able to pull out a 6-10, a 7-9 record, but this is it's beyond the quarterback because their mistakes are not revolving around the quarterback position. The biggest mistake of all was throwing that interception when I think it was a tied football game. It was 30-30. And there's 3 minutes left in the game. You got plenty of time. You have timeouts. Green Bay has no timeouts. I think it was a third down. And they just launch it on a zero coverage, no safeties high. And, obviously he's not a veteran quarterback, so I don't expect him to, figure out what he's going to do. But as an actual, a coaching staff, this is your backup quarterback. Why are you doing this? You can do a better job of play calling. You can do a better job of clock management. You've been running all over them. They kind of abandoned the run. Let's go ahead and look at the play-by-play of that. Looking at it now, and the score was 30-23. You fast forward to 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. First down, they run the ball. Green Bay wastes a timeout. Okay, there we go. I can see the timeouts. Second, they do the same thing. So finally, they have no timeouts on 3rd and 23 from their own 23-yard line. Why would you not run the ball again? Why not? That would have been a wonderful idea. Instead, they get sacked. They lose 12 yards, and they have to give the ball to Green Bay at midfield. Then, of course, we know about Aaron Rodgers getting the touchdown, the tie the football game to Davante Adams. That was expected. You get the ball back under 2 minutes left in the football game. They actually get the ball on their 47-yard line. It's midfield. First play, they throw it for 7 yards. You just got away with throwing the football on first down. The other team has no timeouts. You can kick a game-winning field goal. You're maybe 20 yards away from doing that. On 2nd and 3, you pass again. Run the football, waste the clock. At least make sure they don't get the ball back. Third down, 3rd and 3. Another pass resulting in interception. That's just terrible. That's just a terrible coaching staff. That's what you have. You have an awful coaching staff. I don't care about what happened the rest of the game. Yes, I know. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing about your coaching staff. The players, I didn't see anybody guarding the sideline. You guys on first down, you let the Packers go down and run the ball for 14 yards, and he got out of bounds. If you just would have tackled him inbounds, the Packers likely would not have even had enough time to get as close as they did. So that was just a terrible, poor coaching staff, and it starts with Kyle Shanahan. And I'm not convinced that he's a good coach. These are signs of an awful coach. Maybe he'll learn from it in the future. He's still early, but I'm not happy with what I saw in San Francisco last night. Aaron Rodgers had a great job, but the story of the night is how inept the San Francisco 49ers coaching staff was. One last thing on this game about the Packers is the fact that they struggled to beat this mediocre and terrible team. Lets me know the Packers are not Super Bowl contenders. They're average. The Packers are an average team because average teams, they can play with some of the top teams, but they also struggle against the bottom feeder teams. And every game for them is a tough game. They rarely have blowouts, and that's what seems like what we have with this Green Bay Packers. They did blow out one team this year, but don't expect that on a regular occurrence. They had one shutout against the Bills, but yeah, you saw what they did. They turned around and lost to the Lions. And now they're going to turn around. They're going to lose the next two games to the Rams and Patriots. I have zero faith in them being able to beat the Patriots or the Rams. The Dolphins, they can take because that's at home. And then they'll probably go and lose at Seattle. This is the type of team you're dealing with. And you can't take any team for granted. I mean, that's the National Football League. But especially for a Packers fan, you're going to be on a roller coaster ride for the entire season. Just buckle up. Division leaders in the NFC North is still the Chicago Bears, despite their loss and despite Minnesota and Green Bay both making up ground. They're half a game behind the Bears, who lost to the Dolphins on Sunday. I actually picked the Dolphins to win this game because it was in Miami. And sure, I didn't predict that Khalil Mack would go down to injury, which seems to have been the reason why Miami started getting a lot of success in the second half when he was out. And it also shortens up the Bears linebacker rotation. But, you know, that's a game that you got to win, Chicago. You had the field goal. You got lucky that the running back, Drake, he fumbled at the goal line, and which allowed you to get that field goal to win it. You missed it. They went down, kicked the field goal, won it. That's the life of the NFL. If you expect to be a top dog, you have to be consistently winning these type of games, as you saw the Green Bay Packers did. Green Bay Packers did not deserve to win that game, yet they found a way to win it. So this is what happens when you don't execute. Going over, the Houston Texans are back into the AFC South conversation at 3-3. They were able to get a victory at home against the terrible Bills, who, you know, the Bills are what they are. This is why I didn't figure Josh Allen. There's no point in starting him. They're just a bad football team. Same thing with anybody else they have. They're just going to get out there getting killed. Josh Allen's now week to week with an elbow injury. But looking at the AFC South, there's a three-way tie at the top now. Jacksonville, who lost to the Cowboys. That was a game that I did not see coming. Tennessee lost again to a team that we expected them to beat. Baltimore. How about this? I won't say that they're expected to beat Baltimore, but we expected them to be more competitive. They were just what do they call it? Mollywopped. They were just mollywopped. 21-0 at home. That's embarrassing. Baltimore is not that good of a team. They are a good team, but Tennessee, we expected you to be able to compete in these games. So AFC South right now is up for grabs, just like the NFC North. Predictions to win it, I still think Jacksonville will come away. And I do think the Vikings at this point in time can come away with the NFC North division. All right, so moving on, we did have that Thursday night game. Eagles destroyed the Giants. No surprise there. The Eagles are the best team of that division, but they haven't consistently been showing it. I'm really interested to see what the Redskins can do with a steady quarterback. They're right there in the mix too. Eagles are 3-3, tied for third in the division, or tied for second, and Skins are first place, half a game above the Cowboys and the Eagles. So, you know, we talked junk about the Cowboys, which I don't think they're a playoff team, but you got to give credit where credit is due. They've turned things around, and now they're sitting very pretty at 3-3, right in striking distance to take that division lead. I don't want to say too much about their victory against the Leonard Fournette-less Jaguars, but they beat them down 40-7, and Dak Prescott still didn't have over 200 yards passing. So, you know, this is the same team. I think that victory is more about the Jaguars than it's actually about the Cowboys. We get a big matchup, you know, Cowboys-Redskins. This is about as big as of a Cowboys-Redskins matchup as we've seen in a while, because both teams are fighting really for the divisional lead. Whoever wins this game could be division leaders by the end of the week because Philadelphia has to go play at Carolina. Speaking of Carolina, they stunk it up at Washington D.C. You know, you got to give Washington a little credit, man. They've beaten some decent teams at home. They're pretty like most teams. They have a really decent home field advantage. Cam and Ron Rivera doesn't seem to be on the same page. I'm not exactly sure why the Panthers aren't as confident running Cam on fourth down, but you know, that's a question that could have went into play the first drive of the game. I'm not crucifying Rivera too much for his decision to punt that, but it is 4th and 1 and it is Cam Newton. You're not backed up. You're at midfield. That's a risk, you know, you could take, and a lot of people would take that risk. Ultimately, you can argue it bit them in the butt a little bit, but they had a lot of other plays in that game that they lost. It did not come down to that. So Carolina's got to rebound, and now they have a tough matchup at Philadelphia, as I mentioned earlier. Their hopes of making the playoffs are going to really be dependent on winning these games with the NFC East because they're not going to catch the Saints. The Saints are a much better and complete team than the Carolina right now at the moment. Not to say that Carolina can't beat the Saints, but the Saints are going to show up a little more consistently going forward, in my opinion, especially with Drew Brees at the helm. It's weird that when you say helmet, it doesn't sound right. Oh yeah, he's at the helmet or at the helm. Regardless, I'm sorry, Cam, I love you, but Drew Brees is a legit Hall of Fame quarterback. Legit. Cam, you're not a legit Hall of Fame quarterback. You might eventually get in. Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. And it's weird that you have to clarify that because a first ballot guy, there's a huge difference between a first ballot guy and a guy who might eventually get in. Because we see these guys come around a while, every now and then, but you rarely ever see first ballot Hall of Famers. That's a distinction that, you know, somebody can be really proud of versus just getting into the Hall of Fame. If you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, you are truly a generational face of the NFL. I digress. So Panthers, you know, losing to the Redskins, now you're going to have to cheer for the Redskins to win that division because if it comes down between you and the Eagles or Cowboys, at least you beat the Cowboys, the Eagles, now you have to beat the Eagles because if you lose to the Eagles, you tie the Eagles, they will make the playoffs over you. So this is a huge, huge game. I cannot understate how important this next game is between the Eagles and the Panthers, especially for the Eagles too, because they have to keep pace and they have the Jaguars in London the following week. So we have a lot of very important games in the NFC coming up this week. We can move forward. The Rams beat the Broncos. No surprise there. A good road win at a very tough place to play in Denver that they don't go often. I was still impressed with that. And then we talked about the Ravens beating the Titans. I think it's the same old Ravens story. Great defense, shaky offense. We'll see how they'll turn out later in the season, but they are a team that typically gets better as the season goes on, and as the temperature drops and gets colder, they become a better football team as well. So speaking of the Ravens, you know, we got dirty birds in our mouth. Let's talk about the rest of the AFC North. Very quickly, the Browns, who just beat those Ravens that I told you weren't all that good, they just got demolished by the Chargers, who are also a team that's up and down. Gives you a little hint of the flavor of the NFL this year. Teams are up and down. Teams are winning when they're up and losing when they're down. This is going to clear out probably about week 10. So we've got a few more weeks of this. But the truly elite teams will start to separate themselves in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And when I talk about elite teams, I'm talking about the Steelers and I'm talking about the Patriots. Steelers took care of business last 2 weeks, beating down the Atlanta Falcons, who still have a high-powered offense. Can we talk a moment about how that Steelers defense limited the Falcons to 14 points on the day? That's it, 14 points. I think that's their lowest output on the year. You know, the Falcons put up 34 on the Buccaneers. They put up 37 on the Saints. They put 31 on the Panthers. They did struggle against the Eagles first game of the season. So that's kind of an outlier given that The offense wasn't in rhythm. But since that first game of the season, they've scored 30 points in all of their games except against Pittsburgh. Okay, so keeping that in mind, Pittsburgh just went out against a very good Cincinnati Bengals team. I get you, and I agree that this Bengals team is still the same Bengals that the Steelers we know and love. But to everybody else, they were the 4-1 Bengals. They just put up 37 points against the Falcons and also gave up 36. But they were able to be gutsy. They had a couple wins on the last drive of the game. And 4-1 is a very respectable record. But again, the Steelers came in and just straight dominated them. All penalties and questionable calls aside, we dominated the Bengals in every phase of the game except for special teams. We outgained them. We held them to fewer yards. We didn't turn the ball over, and we effectively shut them down. The Steelers had one bad special team sequence where we gave the Bengals the ball at midfield with a minute to go in the half, and they were able to score a touchdown. But without that special teams error, Cincinnati probably doesn't get a field goal. Case in point, given at the start of the second half, at the beginning of the third quarter, we did the same thing. They had another good runoff to about midfield. The offense started there, and they ended up punting. So we dominated that game. They had some questionable calls, which I will address separately after the end of this episode. But there was the Juju catch that realistically could have been called a touchdown, but the referees, who are not paid by the Steelers, I promise you, Bengal fans, we do not pay the referees, they took away that touchdown from us and they marked it down at the 1. They called the play dead, and the ball was dead at the 1. We ended up kicking a field goal. Actually, that we scored on the 1-yard line, I can totally understand Tomlin's decision not to challenge Connor's run where he got to the 1-yard line, or they called him down at the 1, but it looked like he actually had a elbow on the line. When his elbow came down, the ball's across the plane. That should have been a touchdown. That's some criticism to Mike Tomlin because he mismanaged his challenges, which got into his head, and he decided not to challenge that. Also, he considered the fact that last time we were on the 1-yard line, we were able to run the ball in on the very next play and score a touchdown. So it's not a bad decision for him not going for it, but you have to acknowledge that it was a mistake in using 2020 hindsight. Coaches aren't afforded 2020 hindsight, so we shouldn't judge them on 2020 hindsight. So overall, it's hard to classify that as a mistake for me. And then, of course, we get to the call at the end of the game where that pick play, people call it a pick. I will go over that call again in detail. But AB and Ben Roethlisberger, what more can you say, man? They had a timeout in the pocket just in case things got hairy, had 15 seconds on the clock. But Ben just went and won the game right then and there. No field goal needed. That's the way you want your franchise quarterback to win a game. You prefer not to leave it to kickers. Don't leave it to the kickers because you don't want to have the excuse, well, the kicker missed a kick. But if the kicker makes it, you still didn't do your job completely. So as a quarterback, the best thing you can do to earn your money is to score that go-ahead touchdown to win the game and seal it. And that's what Big Ben did. And Big Ben showing that he is still an elite quarterback thus far, the last 2 weeks. So what's going to make him really show it is put together 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of this type of performances. And don't give us road Ben anymore. Cincinnati is his home. He owns the Bengals and he owns Paul Brown Stadium. So this wasn't exactly a road game of the week. The game of the week this week was Patriots and Chiefs when it comes down to it. I guess you could say it was 2 games of the week. The Steelers-Bengals was a good game. But Patriots-Chiefs had a little bit more of a playoff feeling to it. I'm not overly impressed with either team, just given the fact that it was not a lot of defense being played. We know the Chiefs' defense is ass. It's terrible. The Chiefs' defense is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. We saw the Steelers, even with our controversy and our dysfunction, all the problems we have going wrong in the NFL or with our team, the Chiefs game was right in the middle of that after we tied the Browns, and we still scored 37 points on them after not scoring any points in the first quarter. I think we finished the half with 21, and then we slowed down a little bit in the second half. But we had all kinds of issues going on at the time, and the Patriots are starting to hit their rudder, really starting to churn and get that engine moving and moving that offense forward. So the fact that they needed 43 points to beat the Chiefs lets me know that the Chiefs are legit and the Patriots aren't dominant anymore. Now they're going to continue to they're going to win a division. So when I say dominant, it's something that is a little precarious because the Patriots are always winning, right? And that's the nature of being dominant. But I don't think teams should fear the Patriots, and that's what I mean by they're not down. There's no reason to fear the Patriots at this point in time. I saw Brady; his arm is losing power. I mean, there was a certain play that he tried to go on a seam route to Josh Gordon, and Gordon had his man beat by a step and a half. And normally we see Brady put it right in the breadbasket. He's gone, touchdown. It's tough for the Patriots to make those type of plays right now because Brady can't make those type of throws as consistently as he used to be able to. What happened on that play? He underthrew Josh Gordon. It should have been intercepted. That's what it should have been. When you saw Brady get strip sacked, that's what the result of that was. Brady knows his arm is not as strong, so he's taken in consideration his limitations, which makes him a great quarterback. However, it does allow the defense to get to him more often because he's less confident about his arm. He's less sure of himself, and he's not going to be able to just blindly laser certain passes in there. That he almost got caught up with that again in the red zone. Him throwing a pass as hard as he can is second option to, hey, you know what, maybe I can just run this thing in. He also got lucky, we know, about the Chiefs defender who decided not to risk a roughing a passer penalty and let go of him. That's legit. I said, why did he let go of him? He had him in his arms, and that's the thing we keep trying to tell these NFL executives. If you're playing football, your vision is limited. You don't know whether or not the quarterback's already thrown the ball or not. You know he has the ball, and he's moving, so you're going to grab him. I still blame the player more than the referees because referees don't make the rules. They only enforce them. You just got to play and eat it and just tackle them and hope for the best. But he let him go and he let him score a touchdown. And that you just can't do that. And that ended up losing the Chiefs the game. So I think there was a defensive holding on that play, but you never know what can happen on the next snap. That you can never score a touchdown by penalty. You always got to run another play. But when you give them the touchdown, you don't need the penalty, and you just make it easier for the offense. So to wrap up my thoughts on the Pats Chiefs, again, I do think the Patriots and the Steelers are still elite, but I do think that the Patriots' dominance level has came down a bit closer to what maybe the Steelers have been in the past. The Chiefs are still an elite team until further notice. I just hate looking at that defense. It's just so bad. It's a bad defense, and maybe they'll get better, but I also wonder how good Patrick Mahomes is going to be when the temperature drops because the boy, he's from Texas. This is his first year and consistently playing in these cold games. It's going to be interesting to see how well is he going to sling the ball around because when the ball gets cold, it's not as easy to sling it around. It becomes a rock. It's like hard to catch. It's hard to throw. So how Patrick Mahomes deals with the elements is going to be critical for the Chiefs in their quest for a Super Bowl berth. Because at this point, that's all they're hoping to do. They're just hoping to get out of the AFC. Any team that's not the Patriots, you're just hoping to get out of the AFC into the Super Bowl. So we'll see how that plays because both New England, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City all play in cold weather cities. Hopefully, maybe Patrick Mahomes gets accustomed to that playing in Kansas City. But it's going to be tough if he has to go on the road and deal with the elements. In recent news, Patrick Peterson has become available via trade. Le'Veon Bell still hasn't shown up. As far as Bell not showing up, non-story at this point. We'll see what happens next Monday when we have a game that following Sunday. Patrick Peterson, any team that has Super Bowl aspirations should be inquiring the Cardinals for a trade for Patrick Peterson. It is just unheard of for a player of his capability and his tier, his elite tierness, to be available mid-season. And it doesn't sound like you're going to have to give up much. However, if I'm the Steelers, okay, because that's my team, clearly I'm going to think of them. I think they need Patrick Peterson more than anybody. Our defense is on the cusp of being good. We just need another playmaker, a superstar on the field. And we'd rather have it as an inside linebacker, but you can't be choosy when it comes to superstars. Patrick Peterson is a superstar. We've seen the effect that Joe Hayden has on our defense. Adding another great communicator, another great talent, another ball hawk to the secondary would just take us to the next level. That is what you need when teams are going to be wanting to throw the ball up and down the field. Now, we know there are some teams that can run the ball. We have good run stoppers, but if we can get another ball hawk on our team, Steelers would be Super Bowl bound. And, I'm anticipating Le'Veon Bell coming back, add a little more consistency and a little different dimension to the offense with Le'Veon Bell. Now you can have Connor in the backfield. You can spell Bell out wide, or you can just switch between Connor and Bell and keep them both fresh and keep punishing the defense with a healthy running back. That would be a very scary team. Obviously, New England, they could use him to improve their defense. It's not as bad as the Chiefs' defense, so I think they will be able to use a shutdown corner. And Peterson, also it helps for both the Steelers or the Patriots to keep Peterson away from the other team. Cardinals, if they were dumb enough to trade him within the conference, Patrick Peterson makes any team better. So for them to trade them to any team, I guess that would be just to spite the Rams. But only Super Bowl contenders that teams, I would imagine, would inquire for him. I don't know the Panther systems completely, but I know they're in need of a corner as well. So there's a ton of teams that could use him. His demand should really go up. But I'm surprised I haven't heard many formal offers for Peterson. Maybe we'll hear about him getting traded in the next week or so. But wherever that domino lands, you got to change this landscape. You got to reevaluate the teams once he completes his transaction to his new team. Okay, so there's what you all have been waiting for. I'm sure what everybody watched episode 4, the weekly MST Power Rankings. And as you can see here, the Rams are a perfect 6-0, the last undefeated team in the NFL, the only legitimate Super Bowl contending team in the NFC. They're number 1 in the poll, and deservingly so. They will stay there probably until they lose 2 more games, because even if they lose 1, I still think they're a better team than the Chiefs. Second is still the Chiefs. A lot of people were wondering, the Patriots should be second, right? The Patriots beat the Chiefs. This makes them the bona fide team to beat again in the AFC. Not so fast, my friend. I still believe the Chiefs. I just still believe in them. Like the Patriots, I don't know. I just see a lot of questions surrounding Tom Brady's arm. If New England ever got the type of lead that they get on a team in Foxborough, 99.9% of the time, they don't end up squeaking by 3 on a last-minute field goal. That's just that the Chiefs' ability to come back in those type of conditions with that rookie quarterback, that really told me that they're for real. And I still think they're better than the New England Patriots. And until the Patriots get a better record or the same record as the Chiefs, it looks like the Patriots are going to have to go to Arrowhead Stadium, where they really struggle. They struggle at Arrowhead. They're going to have to go to Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs. So I still got the Chiefs as the better team, considering the fact that if this game was in Arrowhead, which the next game right now appears that it will be in Arrowhead, I got the Chiefs winning. So Chiefs stay on top due to having a better record. Patriots do come in at third at 4-2 and a very impressive win over a previously undefeated team. Clearly, they're the third best team. And then here's where it gets a little dicey. I still, by default, the Saints didn't play this week, so they come in at 4th because they didn't lose. But I don't think that they're really that. I don't think they're the 4th best team in the NFL. Then you have the Baltimore Ravens. They're 4-2 with the Dolphins, who also are 4-2. And I don't think either of these teams are exactly top six teams of the NFL. However, they started off the seasons better than anybody else that we've seen. And I got to give it to them at this point that they're playing at a level that's higher than other teams are playing. So that rounds out your top six of the teams. Let's go on over to the next six. So to round out the top 12 of the power rankings, yes, I know you guys are saying, wow, of course he's a homer for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but you can't tell me that any of those other teams with 2 losses have a better back-to-back wins than the Steelers. And that's what these power rankings are, is your current playing. The Bears have lost 2 games in a row. The Chargers have been very strong, but beating the Browns at this point in time is not as impressive as beating the Bengals and the Falcons. The Panthers, of course, just dropped a game to Washington. Washington has been playing very well, but you're going to tell me between Cincinnati and Washington, who's better? I still think Cincinnati is better than Washington, and we just saw the Steelers beat Cincinnati. So that's my rationale for putting the Steelers at 7. Bengals, still a good team. They just, they're our little brother, and little brothers, you just have a certain power, or big brothers just have a certain power over the little brother. You can smack them upside the head and they'll listen. They're not going to fight back. If there was anybody else smacking my little brother upside the head, he would fight them back. But if it's me, he doesn't do nothing. That's the Bengals and the Steelers for you. The Redskins are the class of the NFC East right now. They have a critical tiebreaker that they gained over the Panthers. As it looks like the Panthers are going to be fighting for a wild card. They could still fight for the division, but right now the Redskins have that upper hand over them. As for the Chargers, they come in at 11th simply because they haven't impressed anybody with their victories. They've beaten the Bills, the Raiders, the Browns, and the Niners. You had an opportunity to beat the Chiefs and played and beat the Rams and lost both games. And I'm just not convinced that this is any different Chargers team that we normally see. They will have some opportunities to prove themselves coming up. They can't drop any of these freebie games, but they get at Seattle, which is a game they'll more than likely lose. Then they also get to play the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Hopefully I'll be at that match. Then they get the Chiefs again. They get the Bengals, and they get the Ravens, and they finish at the Broncos. So it's not an awful schedule, but as I've said before and I say now, the Chargers will continue to disappoint you as long as you keep putting faith in them. If you have no faith in them, they will not disappoint you, and I have no faith in them. Only enough to put them 11th because of their record at 4-2. The last team to round out this top 12 MST power rankings is the Minnesota Vikings. This came down to either the Bears, the Packers, or the Vikings. And I went ahead with I had to go with the Vikings because the Packers just struggled against the Niners. The Bears just blew a game against the Dolphins. This makes me really rethink the Dolphins. I should slide them down too. But I just didn't want to put Pittsburgh that high. I didn't want to put Cincinnati that high. And the Dolphins, 4-2 was a gutsy win. You have to draw some lines somewhere. Yes, Pittsburgh, I want them to earn it. This week, actually during this bye week, they'll probably move up. But as far as Minnesota goes, they went ahead. And last week, I didn't do a power rankings. They beat Philadelphia at Philadelphia. That is a much more impressive win than I saw from the Bears and the Packers recently. That's what knocks them over, both of those teams. And the Bears are actually without Khalil Mack. It looks like they could be at least. He might play against the Patriots, but, the Bears, you just lose to Miami. You lost to Miami, and you lost your spot in the power rankings. That wraps it up. Here's the power rankings again one more time for you. The Miami Dolphins, probably the only team that I think is a little overrated at the moment. But at 4-2 with victories over the Bears, and the only 2 losses they have are on the road. That I think that nods their head just a smidget over the Steelers, who have that tie against the Browns. They do get the line. the Dolphins get the Lions this week. So if you can't beat the Lions, they will come tumbling down. Then they go at Houston, another winnable game. I mean, the only game that's really looked like they're going to lose, they should be losing, are going to be against the Patriots. And then they get the Vikings and Jaguars, all three back-to-back in December. So heading into that game, they should have one of the better records in the AFC. They do play Green Bay at Green Bay on 11-11. So, make a wish and they might be able to win. But the Packers are struggling against the Niners, so they have a really good chance of winning that game. So as promised, we had two really controversial calls in the Cincinnati Bengals versus Pittsburgh Steelers game. The first of which I'm going to address. A lot of Steeler fans were mad at the Juju catch that was not called a touchdown. Why? I mean, look, we ended up scoring a touchdown, as I stated earlier, but this is the reason for the call. If you guys don't know already, I am a basketball referee. I am not a football referee, but a lot of the same principles go into play, and that is that there are certain things that an official knows that he cannot alter. It's not a correctable error, okay? There's certain items that are correctable errors, and there's certain items that are not correctable errors. One non-correctable error in the NFL is when the whistle is blown, the play is dead. That's the same thing in the NBA, the same thing for a lot of things. Now, if there's a continuing action in the NBA, you can let that finish. But in the NFL, once the whistle is blown, there's no more. An example of that is if a quarterback's getting ready to throw a pass and he's stripped, and the quarterback or the referee determines at that time that it was a forward pass, he blows the whistle dead, he blows the play dead. Even if they review it and they say, you know what, that was a fumble, it wasn't a forward pass, the other team who picks up the ball and runs it back for a touchdown because they weren't touched, they don't get that point. They don't get those points. They don't get any of those yards. They get the ball where the ball was recovered. A lot of times, at one point, they weren't even reviewing those. So, that's a very instance where the officials are not supposed to go beyond the dead play, the dead ball. So moving forward with Juju's catch, he actually was called down at the 1. That's where the referee blew the whistle. And under replay, you can't exactly see at which point does Juju have possession of the football. Because initially, it kind of was more of the defender who had the ball. But as they were going down to the ground, you could tell Juju also had some sort of control over the ball, which determined it to be a simultaneous catch. Now, one thing about the NFL rulebook is it doesn't necessarily distinguish whether or not a simultaneous catch can occur or begin before the end zone and can be completed in the end zone. It doesn't give any definitions on that, and these referees don't have rule books on the sidelines. So rather than getting into the specifics of when the catch it began, when it ended, one thing that was certain is his helmet hit the ground and he was being touched, and you called a simultaneous catch, and the whistle was blown dead at the 1. It's just simple to just go with the play stands. You don't need to get all complicated and make your job harder than it needs to be. That was the right call on the field to have the play stand as called. Second call that was controversial was the actual game-winning play when Antonio Brown ran behind a Justin Hunter who took a step forward to shield AB in a sense away from, let's just be honest, the guy hadn't made a actual attempt at the pass, but he was the closest defender that could tackle or disrupt the pass. What the key thing in this play is that the defender was not close enough to do one of those things. He was not close enough to tackle Antonio Brown, and he wasn't close enough to intercept the pass. That's the primary thing that would be called if it was determined to be offensive pass interference. Offensive pass interference can only occur if the defender has an opportunity to catch the football or making an attempt to catch the football, and the offensive player interferes with that attempt to catch the football illegally. That did not happen. You'll see the play shortly, but they are within 5 yards, so he can block. He can stand in front. He's not holding him. He's not doing anything excessive. He's not touching him in the head. That was a completely legal play. If you look at the play again, the Bengals player actually put his arms up to initiate the contact. And it's one of those very subjective calls because it's hard to see this as a referee. You have to see if the ball's in the air, you have to see who initiates the contact, and you have to see if any contact up here is made. So your main concern is make sure there's nothing illegal with the face going on. The Cincinnati Bengals player, whether you want to say it's in self-defense or not, he put his arms up first. That's a symbolism of initiating contact. Now, of course, the player has a right to stand his ground and run his route, and that's where it gets confusing because within 5 yards, the defensive player can put his hands on the receiver and he can do whatever he wants. So the offensive player has every right to run upfield. And that's where I was getting to the holding part. So we didn't see any of that. So really, I mean, it's a call that is never called. Ask a Falcons fan, ask a Broncos fan, ask any other team. They rarely call pick plays. It has to be blatantly obvious. And that one was a very clean pick play comparatively to what we normally see out of a pick play. So.
And blitz. Roethlisberger lets it fly. Oh, Antonio Brown is gone.